And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host and author, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to welcome back for the lucky third time, #1 New York Times bestselling author of now 39 books, Jonathan Kellerman, here to give us the inside scoop on his brand new book out tomorrow, Ghost Orchid. Jonathan, welcome back to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
It's great to see you again. I don't want to nitpick. It's the 39th Alex Delaware novel, but I've probably written close to 60 books over the last 45 years or so.
Oh my God, that is worth nitpicking over. Let's get it right. Okay, so the 39th Alex Delaware book and the near 60th book overall. Oh my gosh, it just keeps getting better, Jonathan. You are so amazing. Wow.
I'm lucky that I have a great readership that enables me to do this. I never thought this would be my main job because I was trained as a psychologist, and I did that and I was a medical school professor. I did that for many years. I never thought this would be my job for most of my life, but I love it. It's the best job in the world.
Well, like your character, Alex Delaware, also a psychologist, drawn into a career he did not expect. Here you are, and we're the better for it.
Thank you so much.
This one, Alex is teaming up with Milo Sturgis once again to solve the unsolvable. Jonathan, tell us what happens.
Well, I don't like to get too much into specific stories. I'd rather talk about writing in general. But this book, part of the puzzle of this book, you have two victims. Now, there are three possibilities. They were both intended. One was intended. The other was intended. So any homicide cop will tell you that, A, identifying your victim and then understanding your victim are the most important steps in solving a murder. So here the task is complex because Milo, with Alex's help, needs to figure out which of the victims, or was it both of them? And until they know that, they can't make any sort of progress. So it's a matter of going through and discovering that. And, my books, I try, I guess because of my background, to always have a whodunit, but also to emphasize the why done it, the motivation, the motive, and what leads people to do bad things.
And I think that's why your books resonate with me, is that I also deeply want to understand why people do bad things.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the whodunit and the why done it. And, here you open up with Alex joining Milo on a crime scene, a double homicide, a gorgeous blonde woman in the buff, in a luxurious property, and an Italian gentleman, also equally unclothed, shot twice through the heart. And we need to, figure out who are these people? Why were they shot? Was he the intended victim? And it's so puzzling. And then with, Milo unraveling the crime from a detective's perspective, Alex, of course, addressing the psychological, and I love how they play off each other. How did you think of this one, Jonathan?
I don't know. Because I'm elderly and have no short-term memory anymore, I write everything down. So I have plot ideas for over 100 books sitting in my file. Yeah. But despite that, I often don't consult the files. I just think of things. I don't really understand the process. It's without being too pretentious or too arty, it's somewhat magical. I like to joke that I am getting paid to do what got me in trouble in school, which was spacing out and making up stories. And I've spoken to other novelists, and they were the same type of kid. That's the one thing we tend to share in common, this vivid imagination and this ability to connect the dots in a strange way. I mean, once Faye and I, we were visited by a literary novelist, and we were driving him on Pacific Coast Highway toward Malibu. And we saw some guy on the road, and Faye and I turned to each other and went, serial killer. And my literary buddy said, oh, you crime novelist. But we just had to see things in that way. For me, the thing that I like to emphasize, my books are not premise driven. They're not what Hollywood calls a high concept novel, which is one of the reasons I think they haven't been turned into films. The late Michael Crichton was the example of a high concept guy. Dinosaurs in amber, you can sum it up in 2 sentences. He did a brilliant job. My books are not like that. And the way I write them, for me, writing a novel is generally a year-long process. Of that process, half the time is spent plotting, outlining, thinking, mulling, refining. And once that's done, then I sit down to write the book. So I find that an idea will come to me, but it's rarely a simple idea. It's a complex idea, a combination of factors. Then I'll start writing down notes, jotting little notes. Then that will evolve to a general outline. Then I'll sit down and do a chapter by chapter outline, which I rarely look at once it's done. I like to think I'm following the outline. Then I finish the book. It's a totally different book. So the thing is, I always look to find motivation to understand the characters. And as I'm writing the book, I'm learning about the characters. And sometimes they surprise me. You hear this cliche from other novels. It's really true. You create these characters. This is a great job because it's close to playing God. You get to create people and move them around and manipulate them. It's a wonderful power you don't have in any other aspect of your life. And then they surprise you. They talk to you. They wake you up in the middle of the night. And someone you thought was this way is another way. So it's an exploratory process. And I think that if you're successful at it, the readers will go through the same sort of process as they gradually learn. I try to do it with a light touch, with a subtle touch, and I try to be fair. I don't pull things out in the last chapter, everything. I try to evolve it. It's just something I've been doing for most of my life. So I won't say it comes naturally. It's hard work. I know because I'm tired when I finish, but I enjoy it. And that's why I do it, because I love it.
And I think that love comes through. What's really interesting to me is that the emotion and the intentionality with which the writer sitting on that side of the page puts into it and feels as they're writing can be felt by us as the reader a year or years and thousands of miles away through the conduit of an inanimate object. We can tell that you're having fun, that you love this, and that this craft is, that you're passionate about this craft, and that comes through. Which is why I think that resonates.
I mean, I've been very, very pleased because I've written so many books, and even these later ones, what people are saying is he's not phoning it in. He's still writing. A lot of times writers who have a series, the most notorious example is Raymond Chandler. He started to hate Philip Marlowe. He really had problems with writing it. Now, of course, Chandler was a misogynist, a misanthrope, and an alcoholic. And he only wrote, I think, six Philip Marlowe books, if that. It doesn't bother me. I've done non-Delaware books, and I've done both, and I've enjoyed writing them all. But I really like writing the Delaware novels. And to my understanding, it's the longest running crime series, certainly in America. I mean, you're going on since 1985. Wow. And I really enjoy it because it enables me to tell a certain type of story, a psychological type of story, a type of story in which you forget the past at your own peril.
Ooh, I like that. Jonathan, I just want to let everyone know we are broadcasting live to 6 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. So we are here to connect readers to their favorite authors. Great. So if anyone has a question or comment for #1 New York Times bestselling author Jonathan Kellerman, just get them going in the comments. Neil is joining us from Facebook. He says, Jonathan, your sentences are so perfect that sometimes I stop and just read them over and over.
Neil, thank you very, very much. The way I do that is I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. I'll do as many as 20 drafts of a single sentence. I'll come back the next morning. First of all, I start each new day by rewriting what I did the previous day. All the stuff I thought was so brilliant in the cold light of morning has paled. And I start by rewriting, which serves a dual purpose. First of all, it improves the writing. And second of all, when you're writing a novel, let's say it's 400 pages. Let's say you do 5 pages a day. You don't want it to come across as 85-page chunks. You want it to come across as a coherent whole. By by rewriting the previous day stuff and segueing into the new stuff, you get that narrative flow. But I really appreciate it because I spent a lot of time trying to construct the best sentence that I can.
Jonathan, do you ever find sharing that your characters speak to you, even waking you up sometimes in the night, that you get one of those sentences and you just it hits with a zing? You're like, that is a good one.
Well, what I like is always a good opening sentence. How I'm going to start a book. That takes a while, and eventually I hit upon a sentence that I like, and I start the book. I don't think about it. To me, introspection is the enemy of creativity. It's the enemy of creativity. Just got to do it. The just do it thing. You have to sit down and write, and that actually is in sync with what psychology has learned. Attitude change follows behavior change. Thinking follows activity. For me, getting into flow is caused by sitting down at my keyboard and doing something and writing. Too much thinking about it, at least in my case, would block me and get in the way. So it's just an experiential thing,
Oh, I love that. Jennifer's joining us from YouTube. She says, hello, Sara and Mr. Kellerman. I absolutely love your writing, Mr. Kellerman.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me after all these years, because you need to understand the room you see me in it's a beautiful office, but it's my office. And I sit here by myself and type. It's a very isolating job. And I produce. This is the beginning of a new book. So you see, I produce paper. And so to hear from other people that they like what I do is fantastic. And I really appreciate it.
Well, it's so moving to see these comments and to see how much your writing means to all of us here. It's really special. Jonathan, do you have a favorite scene in Ghost Orchid? Something that really resonated with you?
Oh, I have a few, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to give away. Let's just say, as you mentioned, I am a painter, and I've been an artist for most of my life. I worked my way through college doing portraits and commercial art, and as the cartoonist for the UCLA Bruins. So, of course, there's an artistic element here in this book that I did get a big kick out of.
Oh, that's so fun. And I also noticed that Robin is Alex Delaware's girlfriend is rehabbing a broken guitar. And I thought to myself, I know someone who plays a classical guitar, likes antique guitars, Mr. Kellerman.
You know how that started? How I created the character? This was interesting. When I wrote the first Delaware novel, When the Bough Breaks, it was published in 85, but I wrote it in 1981. It took a while to write because I was in full-time practice. And people didn't want it. It was rejected a lot and bought for very little money. It was not supposed to be a bestseller. It's bought as a small book. But when I set out to write this book, and it came on, every novel I publish has been a bestseller. But prior to getting published, I wrote a bunch of books that never got published. So I was a rejected writer for 13 years. That's after winning literary awards in college and all that other stuff. So it was a tough time. So when I finally set out to write what became my first novel, I did everything I could to avoid cliches in every sense. Tough cop who happens to be gay against the stir, because I knew people like that. A couple where the male deals with human emotions and the female deals with power tools.
Yeah.
Okay. It's different, quite revolutionary in 1981. It was helped by the fact that my beautiful wife, the well-known novelist Faye Kellerman, in 1981 was pregnant with our second child. And I used to take my instruments, because I have a big collection of musical instruments, to this luthier, a guitar maker, and be in his studio, and we look at the instrument. And Faye came to visit, and this gentleman built guitars too. And she said, and Faye has a degree in dentistry. She has a DDS. She never practiced. She hated it, but she has the degree. So she said, she goes, this is kind of like dentistry without blood. There's inlay, there's small tools, there's dexterity. So she decided to apprentice with Lloyd Baggs and to build a guitar. And she built this unbelievably great guitar. I published a book on my guitar collection back in 2007 called With Strings Attached. And in there is Faye's guitar. And I'm not saying because she built it, she just built one excellent guitar, never built another instrument. So that was my inspiration to make Robin a guitar maker. I had that combination of wanting to avoid the cliche, but also seeing Faye do that. And so that's where it came from.
That I love that backstory. I didn't
Isn't
know
that
that,
something?
Jonathan.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, because Robin, I like when Robin segues from
Yeah.
power tools to toothpicks and tweezers.
Exactly.
It's a delicate job there.
Very much so.
Robin, welcome, joining us from Facebook. She says she is tuning in from the store because she can't bear to miss this interview, and she agrees that the first line of a book is so important. So, Jonathan, let's talk about that first line.
Yeah.
Does it come to you and then you revise it, or do you sometimes go back and think, just isn't right, I've got to completely rewrite it?
Both. I've written so many books that everything happens. In general, I stick with it because it takes me a long time to come up with it. What I aim for. I don't like what I call clunky writing, because I was a reader too. I don't like a book that says, John Smith, the mayor of Pittsburgh, stood on a big hill and looked down at blah, blah, blah. That's just, straight out. I like, and I learned from reading other good writers like Elmore Leonard and Stephen King, to start off in kind of an offbeat, almost distracting way. In other words, talk about something that the book's not going to be about, but this gets us into the book. And that's what I try to do. It has to be, listen, we write crime novels, but all good fiction is mystery fiction, because the reader has to care what happens. If something has to motivate you to turn the page. In our case, we use a crime. In a non-crime novel, it could be something else. But good books, in my opinion, we went through what P.G. Wodehouse said, the kind of novel where people sit around talking for 200 pages and then the adolescent doesn't kill himself. Books about nothing. And now I think we've moved away from it. There has to be a story. We have to care about it. It's all about storytelling. It's not about showing off what a fancy writer you are. It's about telling a story. It's the modern version of cave people sitting around, and Og was better at telling yarns, so everybody listened to him, It's storytelling. So it has to be a good story. So I try to get into the story in an oblique way. And that's what I aim for.
Oh, I love that.
Thank
Ray
you.
joining us from Facebook. He says, Jonathan, can you please talk about LA as a character in your books? I love your descriptions of Southern California.
That was a very insightful question, Ray, because that's exactly how I see LA. LA is a character. I'm lucky to have lived most of my life in Los Angeles, moved here when I was 9. I don't think it's a coincidence that the best crime novels have been written in Southern California. All the way from Santa Barbara down, you have Ross McDonald and Margaret Millar and my late wonderful friend Sue Grafton, all in Santa Barbara, what they call the Santa Teresa, because Ross started that. Down to LA, you have Chandler and lesser known writers who also plumb the depths of Los Angeles. It's always been amazing to me that New York, with all its issues and complexities, hasn't spawned a whole lot of really good crime series. I think Larry Block's Scudder series is the exception. That's a wonderful series with a great sense of New York flavor. Of course, when Hollywood made a movie out of one of them, they switched it to LA and screwed the whole thing up. But anyway, LA is a character, and I'm lucky that I live here, because I could be writing the same stories, but people wouldn't be as interested. People are interested in LA all over the world. I think LA, and I've thought a lot about this because I've been asked this question: why is LA such a good setting for a crime novel? First of all, LA, and I was saying this 30 years ago, is a third world nation. Huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Here, if you have money, it's out there, it's conspicuous. There's none of this keep it under the bed. People, There are other cities that do that. Venice is like that.
Yeah.
Prague is like that. And why is Venice like that? Venice is like that because it was a city state, and the Doges try to make it look really fancy and strong so people wouldn't attack it. In LA, I'm not sure that's the reason, but tremendous disparity, which creates tension. The second thing is weather. Even the bad guys don't come out in really bad weather. They're lazy. But if you have warm weather, and in fact, warm climates have the highest crime rate. The highest crime rates in the world are in Latin America. People get hot. Chandler has this great passage where the Santa Ana winds are coming in, and a woman's standing there in the kitchen with her hand closing around a knife as she looks at her husband. Heat, but sunshine. The other thing is that people come to LA as their last stop. There's nowhere else to go once you hit the Pacific Ocean. So a lot of people come out here because they're finding themselves because they have stress. When I was in practice, before I saw a new patient, a child, I would always do a family history. And I was amazed, among things you ask, what's your support system? What's your extended family? People didn't have it. So many people had moved and left everything behind in the Midwest, in the East Coast. So there's a lot of that. But the main reason I think that LA is so perfect is that our business is the entertainment business. It's the film business. And it wasn't that way when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there was aerospace, there were regular jobs, there were factories, there were all kinds of things. Hollywood was part of it, but not in the way it is now. The last few decades have seen that grow. So the city is obsessed with Hollywood. And what is Hollywood? Hollywood is a business that trucks in fantasy. It trucks often in lies, and I hate to say it, but it's full of some really rotten people. I've talked about this before, but I'm sure most people have seen the movie Get Shorty. But if they've read the book by Elmore Leonard, it's a wonderful book. And Elmore Leonard wrote it because during his early days failing as a novelist, he depended on Hollywood for screenplays and adaptations. So think about the plot of this book. The main character is a guy named Chili, played by John Travolta in this movie. Chili is a bone breaker for the mob in Florida. Okay, that's what he does. He's a bad guy, beats people up for a living. He's brutal. He comes to Hollywood, and he's appalled and almost frightened by the terrible people he meets in Hollywood. So I think that's what Dutch Leonard was trying to say. It's, the Harvey Weinsteins is nothing new. For years, we had the casting couch. Now it's changed, thank God. But it's always been a venal business. And I think that itself leads to a wonderful setting for a crime novel. So that's a long answer. And that's why LA's a character in my books.
That's such a great answer. Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, we have your fellow therapist and your biggest fan, Ms. Judy Ginsburg Sinsheimer, in the audience. And she says, Jonathan, the relationship between Alex and Milo is golden. Thank you. Milo eating in a sloppy way is so real. How did that relationship develop?
Well, Milo was created out of whole cloth. It's very interesting because people who are not creative can't understand the fact that you can make stuff up. So I had so many people, especially in the early days, say, oh, I know who Milo is based on. He's based on that guy. No, he's not based on anybody. Delaware has some similarities to me because I wrote what I knew as a psychologist, but he's younger, more handsome, thinner, taller, braver. He's Walter Mitty. It's a Walter Mitty, but Milo comes from whole cloth, and he was invented in the same way. I was avoiding cliches for this. You never know it's going to be your first novel, and you never know it's going to go further. So you throw everything in there. And I said, it's a crime novel. I'm writing a crime novel, but you have to have a cop in there, and he has to be a major character. I personally don't like books where the amateur does it all and shows up the cops. That's just silly. So I knew we had to have a cop. But in all the books that I'd read, the cop was such a cliche. He was a hard drinking, wisecracking, tough guy. I said, what if we have a guy who's kind of a gruff guy, but he happens to be gay and it doesn't matter. Gay, but so what? Which was very revolutionary in 1981. It's the first gay character in mainstream fiction. Interestingly, the reaction from the gay community has been interesting. The early days, I got all this, oh, thank you so much. And I got awards. And then people start saying, how can Kellerman, as a straight man, presume to write about the gay experience? Okay. So, but that's just silly. That's the whole, misappropriation nonsense. I'm a novelist. I can write about anything because I know how to do it. I just don't write about guys my age. I can write about women. I can write about kids. I can write about people from all backgrounds because I'm curious about the world and I know a lot of people. So that's where Milo came from. I tried to create a foil for Delaware, who's kind of this self-controlled, doesn't talk a lot, does a lot of listening. He's a therapist, good-looking guy. And these two have evolved and become best friends. And I thought the notion of a straight man and a gay man having a friendship was also a revolutionary, non-cliche thing. And why not? I have gay friends, so why not? So that's where he came from. In terms of his eating habits, catch me on the wrong day. I try to eat more like Alex, less like Milo. So, but I think, by the way, that's accurate. I've spent time with a lot of homicide cops, and I've seen a lot of shows with homicide cops. It's such a stressful job, and you could work 24, 35 hours in a row. They just love to sit down with a bunch of food and, treat themselves well because it's so stressful.
Yeah.
So I think it's accurate.
Well, I mean, I like to sit down and eat.
Yeah, we all do.
Everybody, the book is not even out yet. Jonathan Kellerman is joining us here the night before the book drops to answer all of your most pressing questions and give us the inside scoop on his writing process and all things Alex Delaware. So whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, the time to pre-order is now. So here is that link. Click and pre-order. And the good folks at Murder by the Book, our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, will ship you the book first thing in the morning. So click and pre-order so you can get your hands on The Ghost Orchid, the latest in the Alex Delaware Milo Sturgis series. You're not going to want to miss this one. Kim, joining us from Facebook, wants to know, Jonathan, what do you hope that people learn from Alex's character?
That's an interesting question. I never thought about it in those terms. But once again, going back to avoiding cliches. 1981, the prevailing approach was the anti-hero. The anti-hero. He's a bad guy. He can even be a psychopath, but he can become a hero. I know that's nonsense. Bad people do bad stuff. So I decided to create a real hero. He's a good guy. And I think being a good person is being loyal. It's being truthful. It's being honest. And so I hope, without being prissy about it, to create a real hero who's a good guy. And that was revolutionary in 1981. Even now, there's a tendency always to, I actually had a TV producer or the head of a network tell me, well, I like Delaware, but he should have a limp. It's like we're living in the age of disability, where you have to have a hero who's autistic or he's missing a foot or he's just a good guy. And that's it. He's an ethical, intelligent, thoughtful, moral person, and he wants to do the right thing. He's also driven. He's obsessive because if you're not driven, you can't be apathetic about murder. Murder is really bad stuff. The movies will portray homicide cops standing around making wisecracks and making light of it, and I hate that. First of all, it's not true. Anyone who does that shouldn't be investigating murders. The homicide cops that I've met are really sensitive people. They're really sensitive people. They really care. They became homicide. It's a very tough job. They became homicide cops because they really care about justice and they really care about helping families. They're very tender-hearted guys. And yes, there may be an occasional gallows humor just to relieve the tension, but that's not realistic, at least among the homicide cops that I've met.
Jonathan, there are some funny moments in your book, though, which I really like. So speaking of obsessive, one of the things that made me giggle was when Alex is sneaking a late night phone call to Milo, and Robin comes in and says, "Oh, being a little obsessive," and then he says, "I'm sorry, weren't you just out in your studio working on the guitar?" And then she says, "Good night, my fellow compulsive." And
Exactly. That's what they have in common. That's what they have in common. That's why they have a good relationship. And I will confess to a bit of autobiography there. I mean, I am a driven person in the sense that I like to challenge myself. You mentioned I play classical guitar. Well, of course, I've been playing guitar for 65 years. And I played everything. I played in a rock band, played bluegrass. The epitome to me is classical guitar. It's really hard. I play Bach, and Bach tortures me. Why do I do this? I don't know. I could sit around strumming, but it's just and Faye and I were talking about this. I just like to challenge myself. I like to do crosswords in pen. When I paint, people say, "Is it relaxing?" I go, "I guess, except not the way I do it, because I copy old masters and I'm super realistic and I don't just throw paint at a canvas," which is fine. It's just not my personality. I'm very focused, and I like a challenge, a personal challenge.
Wait, so if you do the crosswords in pen,
Yeah.
what if you make a mistake or you don't make mistakes?
I will occasionally make a mistake. I mean, I can do everything through Saturday pretty easily. Saturday crossword puzzles are a little tougher, and I will make a mistake and I get mad at myself. And Faye says, "Why do you do it in pen?" If you get it. But for the most part, I don't know. I just like to. It's just a challenge. It forces me. Doing it in pen forces me to think before I write and become less impulsive. Most of my errors are errors of impulsivity, where I just put it down. So now I have to think about it because you're going to see it. But it's just the way I am. What can I say?
I can't relate to that at all, Jonathan. I have no idea what you're talking about. I want to look at this review from Publishers Weekly, which said Kellerman delivers clever twists alongside the lived-in banner between his leads that sets the series apart. It's both a treat for longtime fans and a great entry point for newcomers. So, Jonathan, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was, 39 books into this series. How do you balance continuing to evolve Milo, continuing to evolve Alex, but also not leaving people behind who maybe are joining you on this 39th book for the first time?
That's a challenge. I mean, you have to write it in such a way it's not so in-jokey that people can pick up a book. I believe at any point in this series, the first book, the 39th book, and everything in between, I write it in a way that you can enjoy it. But on the other end, you have to honor your loyal readers and give them what I call the comfort of the familiar. So it is a challenge, and that's what I like. I like a challenge, and each time you have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, because that would be, I think, one of the hardest things for me, to continue to write book after book after book, keeping it fresh as Publishers Weekly, talking about keeping it fresh, setting the series apart, but still bringing new people in, but honoring the people who've been with you for 39 books. I mean, that's really, that is a master level writing skill, I feel like.
It is. It's a subtlety. You try to avoid what we call plot telling, where you just lay it all and you just give everything. To some extent, you have to have some of it, but you have to do it in a fresh and interesting way. So it's just a matter of, and it's not unique to me. There are plenty of other very skillful writers who do the same thing. It's a challenge. It's hard,
but you do it well, and Booklist also noted that, saying Kellerman continues to surprise and shock this. So Booklist reviewing all 60 of those books and the 39 books in the Alex Delaware series, praising your ability to continue to deliver, as you said, not phoning it in and shocking and surprising the reader. I mean, Jonathan, how do you continue to build and bolster that well of creative energy within you?
I just don't know. It's just something that I've always been able to do. I mean, the thing I do best is draw and paint. Okay. I could do it as a child. By the time I was 10, I could paint like an adult. I don't understand it. I had very little training. I can draw upside down. I can draw with both hands. It's just something that I can do. I don't understand it. Writing is just something I've always enjoyed, but it took me a long time. It took me over a decade to get published because I wasn't good enough. There was no conspiracy to keep me out of publishing. Once I figured it out, okay. But once again, you just never know. You could write a book and people hate it. I've written books where the reviews weren't good and I thought it was a great book, but you put yourself out there. And if you train to do something else, I was a psychologist. When I was a psychologist, I got a lot of respect. People call you doctor and they pay for your advice and blah, 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 blah. Then you become a novelist. And publishers basically treat you like an idiot savant. Publishers' view is, if we could only do books without novelists. I'm sure they hope AI takes over because they just think we're a bunch of babies and temperamental people, and we're a pain in the ass. And, it's just a drag. They have to have writers to produce books, but that's just the way it is. Creative people are a little bit different, So.
Oh my gosh. Well, one thing I also wanted to talk about was the review from Bookpage saying Jonathan Kellerman has created one of the most enduring and acclaimed series in suspense fiction. His prose is fast-paced without being in any way hurried or abrupt, and Delaware and Sturgis play off one another exceptionally well. The characters are as comfortable as old slippers, fictional friends whose company and adventures readers have enjoyed for decades. The Ghost Orchid is another excellent addition to the series, to a series full of excellent additions. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better than that, Jonathan. People love this series.
I'm so pleased that at this point in my life, the reviews are better than ever. So it's just nice to be appreciated. You just never know how your work is going to be received. You just never know. And you can't think about that. In terms of pacing is part of writing a good book. I'm with David Mamet. People talk about story and character as if they're two separate things. And they're not. Yes, you don't want to create a cardboard cutout. You want your characters to seem real, but it's all about story. The characters come out in the story. So I just try to tell the story. There's no filler. As Stephen King says, all killer, no filler when he wants to compliment something. I don't have patience for any sort of filler. There's nothing in there that's not germane to the story. And for me, it was something I had to learn. Because I'm such a visual person, and I could go on and describe things forever, I learned to cut it short. I learned to self-edit. A lot of stuff I think is so brilliant is what I cut out because it's not moving the story along. You have to be sufficiently, not self-critical, but you have to be self-editing in the sense of, like I say, I'll finish something. I think it's amazing. The next morning, it's not so amazing. And so I'm willing to take the time to rework it, and I enjoy it. That's the main thing. I like reworking things. With painting too, I like refining things. With sculpture, I just like to refine as much as I like to begin. And so it's part of having a compulsive personality. I gave the keynote address a few years ago at the American Psychological Association. I was standing in front of thousands of psychologists, and I said, I stand here is living proof of the value of obsessive compulsiveness.
Well, as someone with a slight case of OCD herself,
I understand.
I totally relate.
Yeah.
Jonathan, let me ask you, I find it so interesting that you tried for over a decade, for 13 years, as you shared, to get published. It wasn't happening, but you kept persevering. You kept trying. Two questions. Number one, what kept you going? Was it dogged determination? Was it OCD? Number two, what do you think you shifted to that you finally got right that opened the door to this incredibly successful career?
Okay. I won a writing award in college when I was 21. I got an agent. I thought I was hot stuff. 13 years later, I got my first novel published. The problem was I was undisciplined. I could always spin a phrase. I could always write. I could write poetry. I could do all this stuff, but I didn't treat it professionally. I was lousy at plotting. The books were not coherent. Now, when I was writing in college in the 60s and 70s, you didn't always need to be coherent. There were a lot of those incoherent books that got published. But I think what helped me is I became an academic. I became a professor, and I worked at a hospital, and I did a lot of scientific publishing. I published a lot of academic articles in child psychology and behavioral medicine. And so at least in those days, unlike university president, you had to be original. And so I didn't copy anybody. So you had to document everything you wrote down. And I learned to be organized. And I think that sense of organization. The other thing is I had nothing to say when I was 20 years old. By the time I was 35 or 31 or 30, I had experienced a lot of life because I got my doctorate when I was 24. So by the time I was 31, I had already been doing it for 7 years, and I worked in some very tough situations. So I had experienced life, and that really helped. So that's what led me to become a better writer. I got organized, and as to what kept me going, every time I get a book rejected, I would quit and put it aside, and then I come back to it because I became sad when I wasn't writing. I'm not depressed, but sad. And it's interesting. It's not that I had plenty of time on my hands. I was married. I had kids. I had a job, a full-time job plus, But when I stopped writing, even though it wasn't paying off, I got sad. So I started to realize that for better or for worse, I was addicted to this.
Oh, Jonathan, I love that. You were called to be a writer, and you felt that in your heart, and those books had to come out, and they were going to come out no matter how long it took you.
I finally got the skills. I finally got good enough to go publish. So,
Jonathan, in terms of your writing day, are you a butt in the chair? You're not getting up until you hit 1,000 words or 10 pages or one chapter or whatever it is. Or are you a person who's like, it's not flowing. I'm going to go play my guitar, paint some paintings, and then get my creativity flowing, and then come back when it is, when I am more in flow.
I've never had writer's block. Never had writer's block. Never experienced it. And I think it's because I outline. The late Robert Parker, who wrote the Spencer series, I have a whole bunch of Bob Parker quotes. One of them is, they asked him about writer's block. He said, when you call a plumber, does he say I have plumber's block? So I don't block. Once I tend to sit down and write. You don't wait for inspiration. You just write. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But when you've been doing it for so long, you forgive yourself a little more easily. And generally, I'm pretty happy with what I do. I don't have a word count. I just write until it kind of stops. And I usually I start making a lot of typos. So that's telling me that I'm getting tired. I'm running out of steam. Oh, here's my dog. So, Colette, come here, baby. Come here, sweetie.
Colette.
Oh, she's ignoring me.
Your partner in crime.
She much prefers Faye. But anyway, it's just kind of an organic thing in which I just stop when I'm finished. It tends to work out to about 3 to 5 pages a day. So
I love that. And then you revise it up to 20 times.
Oh, or more. I mean, I just keep working until I'm happy. I started this new book. These pages that I showed you are right on my desk, and I've just gone over and over and over it until I'm finally happy with it.
I love that. So, Jonathan, I just want to clarify something you said at the beginning. You said it takes you a year to write the books, and how much of that time is spent outlining versus
about half and half? It's about half planning and half writing. 6-7 months planning, 6-7 months writing.
So when Jeffrey Deaver came on, he shared that he writes his outlines, which run up to his same thing, 6 months, and then he goes into it. He writes in a completely blacked out room, tactile typing, and that the outline, I'm assuming your process is the same because, obviously that's just basic, but that the outlines can run 180 pages. How long do your outlines usually run?
I've done longer, not that long, 20, 30 pages. And as I say, I don't have any of these eccentricities, dark rooms. I just come to my office. I feed my fish. I've already spent time with Faye, listening to music. Faye and I have been together 53 years. Oh. And wherever we are, we spend the morning together. We really try to spend the morning. We listen to music. We have coffee. We talk about our kids and grandkids and our dog, who's the 5th child who doesn't talk back. And it's, and the other thing, because I treat it as a job, I don't write in my bathrobe or in my pajamas. I'm usually in the gym for a while. Once I finish exercising, I take a shower, I get dressed, I shave, I look like a mensch, and I sit down and write the book. So I'm not very quirky. I have a lovely office here. As you can see, it's really a pretty place.
Beautiful.
But the truth is, once I'm here, I'm not even paying attention. We used to have a house in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I had a beautiful office with gorgeous views of the Rocky Mountains. And I don't think I ever looked out the window when I was working there because I was just staring at a wall typing. So everyone has a different style. I just don't think too much about it. And I have to be flexible because in my failed writer days, I was working from 11 p.m. to 1 in a garage. So because I was working full time. I'd come home after seeing a lot of patients, and I ran a program at the hospital with 3,000 patients. I had a staff of 12 people. It was a complicated job. And so I'd come home, be with Faye and the kids, and then everyone would go to sleep. And then 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., I'd write in my garage. And now I have the luxury of writing in the morning. So it's much better, but I can write whenever. But if my morning is busy, I can come back in the afternoon. I'm not beholden to anything rigid.
Oh, Jonathan Kellerman, this is a masterclass in writing. It is such a pleasure to talk with you. Everybody, the book drops tomorrow, whether you're watching from Facebook or YouTube. Click and pre-order tonight, and the good folks at our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book, will send that book out to you tomorrow. And you too can get your hands on The Ghost Orchid, Jonathan Kellerman's 39th book in the Alex Delaware series. Jonathan, congratulations. What a pleasure to speak with you again. I can't believe the next book will be number 40, and you have to come back and give us the insight on that, because that's a big deal. This is amazing.
I think talking to you, Sarah, is something I look forward to every year, and I hope to be doing it for a long time.
Me too, Jonathan. Such a pleasure and an honor. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your light. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Cindy, Carol, Shanae, Sybil, Dot, Carolyn, Helen K, Robin, Steve, Jonathan, Kim, Susan, Rebecca. Oh my goodness. I can't even get to everybody. Thank you, Cindy, for watching. Catherine, Patricia, Linda, Steve K, Robert, and Olivia. And if I missed anyone, I'm so sorry. Thank you all for joining us. What a pleasure to chat with you and to share our Mystery Monday with you, getting our week off to a killer start. May the pages fly and the days as well. And I will see you all next Mystery Monday. Take very good care until then.